Okay? And I will tell you my own experience. And I did not cut classes, although the class was boring. I did not, I was a conformist all along. I was thinking, if I do this, it may be, I'll get a good job. If I do this, I'll get a good pay, okay? But somewhere down the line, the same thing happened to me, that which happened to almost everyone. You find your passion. Maybe you find your passion a bit late. Maybe you find your passion, but you're too scared. Maybe you love it so much, but you don't know the way. How do you get it? How do you get there? So my journey was a little bit very academic in nature. But right now, where I stand, I think I'm a little short of being a rebel. And I know what's wrong. I have seen what doesn't work and what works in academia. And so I'm going to share my story with you. And what I really found is doing simple things, hands-on, is a lot more educative than accumulating degrees or just going through it for the sake of it. I don't mind telling you that it took me a long time to get back to what I was really passionate about. I wanted to make a motor when I heard it in my earlier classes, somewhere around my 6th grade or so. So my story starts, as a kid, I ran to make a motor no sooner it was taught in the class. So when I heard that to make a motor, all you need is a coil, all you need is a magnet, all you need is a battery, I said, okay, fine, I'll just go home and I'll try to do this. But when I tried doing it, my motor never turned. I had a problem, and I didn't know at that stage how to even debug the problem. I was just frustrated. And the dry schematic in the textbook never helped me. A lot of things were unsaid, a lot of things were hidden. So there was no formula for me to debug my problem. So textbook was all full of formulas, full of facts, full of stuff that you need to digest just before the exam and get stressed up and never even dream of doing anything. The textbook never came alive to me. But I moved on. So my motor never moved, but I moved on. So I finished, but that was lurking in the back of my mind. And it was lurking for a long time. And I'll tell you, and I can challenge anyone else who thinks it's a very simple thing. I can challenge anyone else who thinks he can do it without ever even trying to do it. Okay? When you get down to the grassroots, you are really tested, no matter how simple the problem it is. So I'll show you, I moved on, as I said, and I fell in love with other things like stars, galaxies, physics, and I wanted to know almost everything. I wanted to know how this world came about. I wanted to know about astrophysics. And I fell in love with all those concepts which were really abstract. Because you can't weigh a star. You don't know how hot the star is. You don't know what's happening inside a star. But you build on it. And how do you build on it? You build on it through the language of science. And you build on it with confidence at every step. And that's what makes you so sure that if you have heard about the latest Nobel Prizes on the discovery of the Higgs boson or the LIGO detector that actually detected the gravitational waves, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how we can really construct the structure of the science and step by step validate it at every step and really gain confidence even without actually being there. Who was born so many billion years ago? There was no life. How are we so sure that some billions of years ago there were two black holes that collided and there was a gravitational wave? How can you be sure that the signal you got on your so-called sophisticated LIGO detector is real? It's all because of the structure of science, the way we have organized our knowledge. And you need to gain confidence in everything. You need to validate everything. And speaking of validation, here's a wonderful curve. Here's a wonderful curve. And I'm going to take just 2 minutes to explain this curve. This curve is what you get when something explodes. Okay? And when something explodes, it generates a lot of heat. When it generates a lot of heat, it's not just heat, it also generates light. And if you do examine how much light came about in every wavelength, let's say red, yellow, green, orange, whatever, you name it, every wavelength plotted along this axis, you get a beautiful curve on the intensity. The y-axis is intensity. Okay? So just take it from me that we did a fair job. The physicists who were interested in doing this kind of experiment did a fair job of measurements. And you know what is here? All the dots are the observations. Dots are what you get when you get into the lab and measure. And the curve that so closely hugs the dots is theory. And it's called black body radiation. All of us radiate. You, me, the chair, anything that's hot, anything that's at some particular temperature radiates. Okay? Now, what is this radiation actually? This radiation is called cosmic microwave background radiation. Something that you would have seen when some object, let's say our own universe, expanded, exploded, expanded, cooled, and later on, it radiated. It kept on radiating. And why is this a great curve? Because it fits the theoretical model of a black body. I can do the same experiment in the lab, I'll get the same curve. And looking at a curve, I can tell you what is the temperature of that body. Okay? So this is one of the most fascinating model to hardware. Hardware is what you have, solid stuff in the lab. Model is what you thought about. Okay? So this actually gives me a lot of confidence saying that, if you have a model, if you have a theory, and if you understand every bit of it, the constructs, and if you go ahead and do an experiment, and if the experiment matches, okay, there is nothing like it. You don't need a third party to come and tell you that, hey, you're wrong or you're right. The proof is in the pudding. If your model matches, it's great. If your model doesn't match, you got to rack your brains and find something else. Maybe it's an opportunity to find something new. And that's how science progressed. Okay? So let me switch gears a little bit and tell you that this is what I taught kids last May. And I told them that no matter what you're doing in science, there is this one wing of science, which is theory, and the other wing of science, which is experiment. Okay? Both theory and experiments have to be done together. They have to talk to each other. How do you talk? Theory, let me just go back. Theory actually says something, and experiment you would go and try to validate it. If it validates, bingo, you get a prize. If it's not, there's something wrong, and you need to debug. You need to debug either the theory or either the experiment. And the whole of physics is playing this game. The whole of science is playing this game. And what we did with our kids last May was, I took very simple cases. In fact, I was trying to bring the textbook to life, something that never happened to me. So while I was trying to bring the textbook to life, I was amused that there are so many things that we learn even from kids, so the way they think, the out-of-box thinking of kids, and how conditioned we get when we're doing an experiment. Okay? So let me move on and tell you about one simple example, how the pendulum, the simple pendulum, hit back with a lot of power. I was watching my daughter learn pendulum, the simple pendulum. It was a simple formula. I guess all of you must have seen it at some point of time, and if not, it doesn't matter. But all that matters is, this is one of the toy models in physics, one of the toy models in science, where you learn a lot from. Okay? The way it was happening was my daughter was having a test or something, and she was reading the formula, and I suddenly came to her and said, there's a nicer way of looking at it. We can take a simple pendulum, we can just oscillate it, we can measure the time, we can match it with the formula. It just depends on the length and depends upon, that's it, the gravity. It depends on gravity, how fast it pulls it back, how fast it oscillates. So I tried doing the experiment with a small pendulum. I got a wrong answer. And when I got a wrong answer, just like my motor, that never turned. I got a wrong answer, and then my wife was looking at me and said, so much for being a scientist, okay? I felt challenged. I said, if I can't do this, forget about astrophysics. Forget about the universe and the creation, okay? So I took almost half a day to do the experiment in a refined manner. I really got my hands to think. That was the first time when I said, okay, I think there's a lot that we need to do when we teach our kids how to do science, how to learn science, the methodology of science. We need to reform. One wing is missing. We are not doing the hands-on stuff. The other wing is just lame. We are just mugging through our exams. And that's the reason why the earlier speakers was not at all interested in attending the classes. It never caught their attention. It never caught their imagination. And to a large extent to me also. But then I was always trying to see if there is a better way to do it, if there's a more interesting way to say it. And so I did that, and bingo, I got the right value. And then that day was, my daughter learned about a simple pendulum, but I learned a lot about how science should be taught. Okay? So back to the motor. My motor actually started turning only a couple of years ago, 1 or 2 years ago. Because I got back to the problem with intensity. I said, man, I have to do it. Well, you can go ahead and buy the motors from the shop. I mean, there are all kinds of toys where there are these simple motors. You can just open them up and see what's wrong. But you know, that element of thinking was missing. Even if there's an electrical engineer in this hall, I can actually challenge him to explain how does a motor turn. I'll tell you, they will fumble. Okay, why am I so confident about this? Because when I could not get my motor to turn till I debugged it here. Okay, I just kept applying all the laws, Fleming's rules, left hand, right hand, and eventually I found one day that, you know, it was working against a fundamental force. And then I said, oh, I know what to do. Okay, I won't get into the details, but I said the thinking had to be done. So with some thinking and copper coils and magnets and supports, which are actually called, technical name to it, it's called split rings, but I actually arrived at split rings by just thinking, and then a battery, bingo, your motor turns. I urge each one of you, if you have time, to go back and try this. And I made all the kids make the motor turn. Later on, it was like fun. This became our simple toy model for teaching. This became like something like a pendulum. And I was accumulating all these toy models, so no matter what the theme. Okay, I could teach electricity, I could teach magnetism, and I could teach mechanics, I could teach fluids, and that's what I'm going to show you what we did with the kids. And the amazing things that the kids did when they were asked to think free. No exams, holiday time, good food, a lot of fun in the evening. And so that was a good summer program where I realized that once the kids do hands-on stuff, they're actually much better than you. And I'm going to show you that. Okay, so when I started telling everyone about my motors, the joy on the kid's face, elders are no exception. When you see something turn, wow, what an excitement. What a sense of achievement. That was palpable. My motor went places then. A motor that never moved started moving, okay? The motor went to boardroom discussions in my previous company. I used to work for IBM, and this became a topic for design thinking, okay? A simple motor and the way you debug the problems became the subject matter for design thinking. So starting from exciting a kid to a very high-level discussions on design thinking and debugging, the motor was everywhere suddenly. People realize the value of doing things, simple things, perfectly. And if you ignore a certain feature, you'll be caught. So debugging the issues with simple, basic thinking all the way. Never give up on your fundamentals. If you're not able to solve a problem, there's something wrong somewhere in the fundamentals. Okay? Moving on, I want to show you how the textbook was brought to life and what these kids did last time. I gave them a pendulum to work on. I gave them a magnet to play with. I gave them iron filings. I was expecting them to do things A. They did not only A, but they did A and B and C. And that's where I was really amazed, and that's what I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to play the video, and let's see how this goes. Oh, go back. I want this to play. Okay, watch. Watch the kids doing diligently, kids doing the experiments with a lot of patience. All because I told them that eventually it's going to validate their thinking, the model. So this was the normal length of the pendulum that I have recommended. In comes this guy who's sitting right there on top. He wanted to do a 6-meter pendulum. And I was scared. I said, man, the 6 meter, I don't know how it's going to work out. It might not even oscillate. It might give you wrong results. Okay, and I let this guy do this. And lo and behold, the data that this guy got for the time period of the pendulum was one of the best. One of the best. So in his honor, we named that point on the graph as, Devaj point. His name was Devaj. And so that's what kids did. They went beyond the norm. And you will see the next part where I gave them magnets to play with. So you see, I wanted them to visualize the magnetic fields around a simple bar magnet. And they did something amazing too. They not only restricted them, they did not restrict themselves to 2 dimensions. They suddenly dipped the whole magnet into the iron filings. And what they got was 3-dimensional magnetic fields. 3-dimensional magnetic fields which are traced by these iron filings. Just by playing. Okay? And you would see some dry diagrams of magnetic fields in any of the textbooks of science. And you would see that people never will have the fun or the feel unless they really dirty their feet with this, dirty their hands with this. And here's what this guy is doing now. He has dipped another magnet, and he's going to bring the poles closer. Okay? Magnet has north pole and south pole, so he's going to bring the poles closer. Then he's going to flip it and bring the poles closer and see the interplay of those iron filings. You are virtually visualizing a 3-dimensional field, magnetic field. Now this is north pole and south pole. This is north pole and south pole, and he's going to flip it. He's going to flip it in a minute. There he flips, and see how they repel. See how the magnetic lines of force repel. Magnetic lines of force. All these were like abstract concepts when we were reading it for the first time. But you allow them to play with these iron filings, play with the magnets. Lo and behold, they exceed your expectations. We move on and to go to the next level, where I just want to show you a simple kit. I want to show you a simple thing that we ought to do in almost any class, not just the school or not just the college level, even at the degree level. Okay, if someone says that you want to learn thermodynamics, we generally don't do this, or we don't really see a discussion of this. So what I want to show you is, I've got hot water here, and this is something that turns. This is nice. This is a nice looking wheel, and there's something that blocks the two metal plates. So one plate and the other plate, and in between there's foam. So the wheel turns, and the foam keeps jumping up and down between the plates. And I'm going to show you that in more closer detail. But what I want to show you is, and this guy is hot, hopefully he's hotter, and I'm just going to put it on this hot surface. All I'm creating is some heat at the bottom plate, and actually no heat on the top plate. The top plate is left to the environment. There's AC, and so it's cooler. So there is a small difference in temperature, and I hope I'm a hot water stock. So I'm just heating the bottom plate. Okay? So I'm just heating the bottom plate, and what do you expect? There's air inside. Okay? There's air inside, and the air gets hot. So the air, as long as it is in touch with the bottom plate, gets hot. So the air expands. All of us know that. The air expands. So when the air expands, it will push the stuff that is hanging on it, the foam, this small stuff that is hanging on it. And this guy goes up, he turns the wheel. Okay? The moment he goes up, the foam falls down. So no more heating. And so air cools. So this guy will contract. So I'm just going to give it a nudge. I need to give it initial nudge because it has some inertia. And look at the beauty of this experiment. You don't have to do much. But what is the challenge? The challenge is simply this. I need to be very precise in the way I make these things. There are lots of stuff that can come in my way, like they came to me when I was a kid, not being able to run the motor. The motor was stuck because of lots of friction somewhere. I didn't know how to remove the friction. The motor was stuck because I couldn't think of nice supports for the coil. And look at this beautiful apparatus here, which I can use to teach kids, even grad students, and show them that, hey, heat is getting converted to work. And the complicated stuff that you read as thermodynamics is nothing but just heat getting converted to work. Okay? Thank you. So, one more minute. I know I have exceeded my time, but what are the issues that we face in enabling such hands-on thinking? Okay? Schools, colleges, and maybe universities. Not this university, because I've been sampling everyone and I've been asking everyone, how are your labs? Everyone's happy with the labs. So kudos to PDPU. All these institutions are cutting down on investments that may actually promote a healthy lab culture. What are the issues? Capital costs. I can't make a space for the lab. I can't dedicate extra space for labs. I can't buy the materials, and these are costly materials, okay? And I have to maintain. Some of them break. One of the kits I brought in the morning broke. So you need to take care of that. I need to maintain staff. The lack of teaching experts. The teachers themselves have to be hands-on even before they expect the class to be hands-on. So this vicious cycle has to be broken somehow, okay? Short-sighted return on investment calculations won't help. We need to invest big time in getting this to work, the hands-on thinking. In USA, they have recognized a similar problem. People are cutting corners and not being able to invest in lab space, in materials. They too face a similar problem in schooling, and so there are things called food trucks. The food trucks are not food trucks. The food trucks are trucks, giant trucks loaded with experiments, hands-on experiments, and the trucks travel. Like the ones we have a smaller version of that from Agastya Science Foundation that caters to schools. And so they have food trucks, and they have begun addressing the problems. Only then will the likes of Silicon Valleys spring forth and sustain. I rest my case. Thank you.